welcome back. It's the beer thunder, and we are entering the fucking Thunderdome because all will enter and everyone is going to be sacrificed to the blood god, in the name of the amazing F4U for Bussy. Now we're doing something that's a little bit unique. It's something I don't think I've really seen anyone cover in Sim, and I'm going to cover a couple of things. I'm going to cover team play primarily because the fact that there are players that play in a team in Sim does change the way that you have to play the game and the way you have to approach things. And I'm also going to hopefully give you some strategies to work against it, so you're maybe not getting as hardcore farmed by your average 2-person, 3-person, 4-person pub stomping gambit. Now, we're in the F4U4B, and we are facing down Idaho Bookworm's wingman. Not Idaho himself, but probably his two guys that are arguably his two best players, at least on average, if you want to go by kill-to-death ratio. We are fighting Count Chocula and the other guy, Booberry, the serial-themed named guys, and they are flying Yak 3Us. On the other hand, I'm flying F4U4B, and I have Vex 7 on my team, and Vex is one of my dudes, and he's pretty good. He has a really solid base in energy fighting and dog fighting, etc., etc., etc. But we were starting the video at the kind of merge between both of our teams. The Yak 3Us, they come in, and Vex gets immediately taken out. We are fighting at a numerical disadvantage in this situation. And usually what happens with Booberry and Chocula, they are usually directly next to each other. So if you fight one, you're going to have to fight the other, and you have a very limited window of opportunity. And this is the issue that comes about when you are fighting teams of dedicated players, especially when they're running like really strong meta planes. And in a previous video, I covered that, yes, I do in fact believe that the Yak 3U for Sim is probably the strongest 6.0 plane. It's definitely one of the best Yaks for the BR, but the F4U4B is not a slouch. I would argue it's just as good. Maybe in some contexts it's slightly better, because obviously throughout the course of this game it's going to last about an hour and a half or so, and we eventually win by like the skin of our teeth. And the 4B has some advantages that it can use against the Yak 3U. Namely, it's a decent, respectable bit faster, especially at higher altitudes, but it also has a higher dive speed, and the rip speed of the Yak is something that you can utilize to gain separation from it. If you look back at the footage of the dogfight as it was initiated, you will notice that I put the plane into a dive and I started to separate. I started to point the nose down to maintain a speed that is higher than he could maintain, and as soon as he broke off, because I knew that he was alone, because I knew that his best buddy was not nearby, I initiated the dogfight with kind of running the gamble that when he is faced alone and by himself, that the dogfighting fundamentals are not quite nearly as refined as mine. And this was a pretty reliable gamble. This is something that is pretty typical of most sim players, at least most sim players in relation to people that practice the old duel. And so even though he has the better plane, even though he has an advantage in a maneuvering fight, he isn't quite able to utilize them. And he's not near his teammate, so although the fight drags on for a while, he has to support himself. And without mutual support distance, a lot of these squatted players don't do nearly as well as they normally do. Unfortunately, one of the side effects of squatting, especially against random solo players, is that I don't think it's intentional on their part. It could be, but things do tend to turn into pub stomping, where there's 2 or 3 players that are working as a team. They come in, they wipe out the entire server. The random coordination of just random players, people that are just trying to learn how to play the game mode, people that are struggling to control their planes, ends up in a situation where they go 10-0 and the other team quits. And really the only way to offset that is to form your own squad and join the enemy team. And I'm one of these guys that kind of does that more or less more often, because Playing against dedicated teams forces me to adapt my playstyle and kind of think about the game in a bigger picture. It's also just fun. Like, playing solo all the time is not necessarily the best. I'm not going to encourage people to not have friends for the sake of the fairness of the game. At the same time, though, if you're forming like a 5-person team to just stomp the shit out of like noobs, like, maybe don't do that because that makes player retention bad. But part of countering other players, though, and other teams is learning how to work with another person. Now, me and Vex have been flying together for a decent amount of time, and we vibe together pretty well because even when we're sweating our balls off, the gameplay is actually pretty low stakes. Like, if you were in the voice channel when he died or when I die eventually later in this video, it's pretty muted. It's not any kind of frustration driven. Like, as the game goes on, as our team starts to disappear, we have to adapt our strategy. And usually the adaptation of the strategy focuses more around playing energy, speed, and trying to get into an offensive position where you can work against the enemy team one by one, as opposed to being directly below multiple players at the same time, because being defensive like 2v6 is not a good position to be in. It's a very difficult position to work your way out of. But fortunately, the F4U4B is fast, and it gives us something to work with, and it gives us a strategy that we can reliably drag and bag things that are above us. We can exceed the speed that they're able to maintain. We're able to maintain distance from them. Because as I ran away, as I was reapproaching the furball, we were thinking that we can come in at this at kind of the same altitude as these 109s and whatnot that are up here. But we get dove on by a G56. This is a mistake on my part, because earlier when I had looked at it, I had kind of assumed that it might be a bomber. It might be someone who's bombing from the stratosphere, not an enemy fighter plane. It was a risk that I took. And as it comes down, we realize that, hey, we are defensive now. We are in the position that I said that we don't want to be in, but we are going to utilize the speed. And as I'm in defensive, though, I'm able to drag the guys that are chasing me around and put them into a position in order for Vex to come in and clean them up. We are being trailed by a Yak-3U, and the Yak-3Us in this game are kind of our priority targets. So Vex comes in, the Yak-3U is looking at me, and Vex comes in, gets the kill. The two guys that are trailing behind Vex that have the energy advantage, or at least have the altitude advantage, are going to trail him, and I am going to reverse my course and come try to split them off. And what we are doing is more or less a speed-based, like, linear defense. They can't catch us for the most part, and as long as we don't pass directly below someone at high altitude who, like, points their plane in a 90-degree dive and cuts us off, we can make this fight last a while. We can kind of fight the whole entire enemy team. Now, I look behind me, and I use the J-out key to find the name of the person, because usually if you know the name of the person, you can kind of figure out what plane they're in, even if they're sitting in your blind spot. And we kind of assess that this guy that's behind us is a 109K4, and as he came in with more speed, he starts executing these barrel rolls in order to try to stay behind us. And that plays to our advantage because we have a higher sustainable speed, so we're just going to continue running away and getting separation, and we're going to try to close in on the guy that is trailing Vex. Now, Vex says, hey, I can just take this guy in a big circle and I will clear your 6, because I'm in more danger, or was in more danger immediately than Vex was, because the 109, when he came in, was close enough to shoot me down. If that round had procced better, we wouldn't have just lost a flap. And the G56 is also much more slow than the F4U compared to the K4. The K4 is faster, so getting rid of that guy is a good tactical decision. But Vex is still on the same thing. He is dragging this guy around. He is using speed. And I call out, hey, you got an LA-9 and LA-11 coming in. He's coming in with a lot of speed. You have to start pulling the nose down. This guy is going to try to close the distance, and he's going to get very close to doing it. And this is a situation that you don't want to be in. This is not a good defensive situation, because if the LA-11 closes the distance, even though the LA-11 is not necessarily the best dogfighter, he's being reinforced with a G56, which is one of the the better 6.0 dogfighters. It's not a 0 by any means, but it is very solid. And 2v1 against the G56 would probably result in Vex getting shot down, Vex getting damaged, and it would force us into a situation where we get slow, and the Yak 3U pair that we killed earlier, they're on their way back. They are coming for us. They know that we are here, and they are out for our blood. But the G56E eventually ends up having to slow down. We close the distance. We get our own reinforcements. We get our own teammate here. And I tell Vex, hey man, you can actually start turning, because now the LA-11 is in the situation that Vex was just in. He is being trailed by two planes that have really good guns that are faster at this point, and can't turn fight him reliably. So as he goes up, as he initiates this turn fight, it gets this guy slow, and if we can get this guy out of the way, in theory, if we are safe, we can start regaining energy. Or, in this case, I could go back to base and rearm because I have no ammo. But, as I said, the Yak 3Us are out for blood. They are behind me. They are behind Vex. They go after a Corsair. I'm assuming that they assume that it's Vex, and we are lucky that it isn't. But I have one behind me. Now, just because I'm out of ammo, and just because I'm going away, doesn't mean that I'm going to be completely useless. I'm going to try to utilize the fact that they want to kill me, they are out for blood, against them, and I'm going to try to get this guy to commit to the dogfight. Now, the point of me committing to the dogfight isn't to kill him, it is to put him into a position where he can be killed. And he also came in with enough speed that if I had just continued straight, he would have easily closed the distance. So this ends up being one of the better defensive options. We go into a flat scissors, we deploy the gear, and we get him to overshoot. And as he commits to this style of fighting, it's going to set Vex up into a position where he can kill him. And it also sets me up into a position where I had the potential now to maybe make it back to the base. And this guy wants me so bad that even when he was trailing directly behind me, he kind of ignored all the shots that were going past him. But it is not to be. We do not make it back to the base because we have another Yak 3U. This is, I think, Count Chocula, and we die, but in the same instance, he has had his teammate taken out. He has been split up from his team, and this dogfight is going to look a lot like the earlier one, except in this case, it's roughly a 3v1, because I think there's another Corsair in the mix somewhere, or there's going to be one. And there's also a P-47 somewhere in the mix. But because Vex has a little bit better fundamentals at dogfighting, and because he enters in a much better position, the Yak 3U is not really going to be able to work himself out of it. Now, he has the potential to, but because we are basically off the end of our runway, the mutual support reinforcing time, the ultimate conclusion of this fight, if it goes on too long, is someone will come in and third-party him. This is the situation you don't want to be in as a team, where you're split up from your teammate, you're split up from your partner, and you are forced to dogfight at low altitude. And eventually what happens is he's going to go for the P-47, that reverses his turn in front of Vex, and Vex is right there, and he's going to put him in the drink. And we are going to come out of this with around 8 kills for the cost of 2 of our own, which is, considering the team composition, is a pretty decent, respectable exchange ratio. And that's going to be the end of the gameplay portion. I'm just going to skip to the end of match screen and just kind of show what the scoreboard eventually looked like. It eventually ends up with me getting 9 kills. Vex actually does better. He gets 11. And all of these players on our team, for the most part, except for Tarnsman Oz, do go negative in the kill-to-death ratio department. And most of these guys, I've never seen them before, and most of these guys, they come in and they don't do well right away, and then they leave. And this was a very rough match to play on the Allied side, to be honest. The Red side has not only the 2 players that are definitely squatted, I also came to suspect that the 109s also might have been working together as well. So it was a very stout game, it was very difficult, but we were able to use teamwork and the power of friendship to pull it off in the end. Anyways, that's going to be the video. If you like what I do, give me a like, give me a subscribe.